For decades, the 2JZ was the go-to engine if you were talking about 1000 horsepower or more. Why? Because it was affordable to tune and it could take a beating. But we believe there's something new. We built two S58 engines to 1000 brake horsepower, not knowing what will happen. And this is already 2 years ago. The past 2 years have been a super exciting journey. Not everything went according to plan. But for sure, it was not the engine's fault. We have abused these babies quite hard. We've done more than 30 events. We used hundreds of tires and 1000 liters of fuel went through. And today, it's time to look at the status quo. We got the chance to come here to BMW M to look inside our engines with the experts. And I would say we take you along today and show you exactly what we find. But first, let's see how the journey started and what we initially modified on our S58 engines. We started our project with a bone stock S58 engine. This engine came out on the market in the year 2019 in the X3, X4M, and ever since 2021 it's also in the M3, M4, and from now on you can also get it in the M2. The base layout of the engine is a 3-liter inline 6-cylinder with 2 turbos. The power output starts at 460 horsepower in the manual M2 and it ends up at 550 horsepower in the M4 CSL. The 550 horsepower that you get in an M4 CSL are already quite a lot. However, in nowadays drifting, we talk about 4-digit horsepower numbers on a daily basis. So that's why we had to modify quite a bit to make this engine as powerful as we need. We started with adding a bigger turbo to bring in more air to the engine. Also, we modified the cylinder head a little bit, the geometry of the combustion chamber, of the inlet and exhaust channels. That's basically the only modifications inside the engine. Other than that, there are only stock parts, piston, connecting rods, crankshaft, everything is stock, which is, in my eyes, quite insane. We sticked with a direct injection. We maxed that out at around 750 horsepower. We added port injection as well. So with both fuel systems running, we have a capability of about 1200 horsepower. And with all that power, you also need a lot of cooling. That's why we have a big radiator pack in the front and another one in the rear. To control all that, we are quite happy that we partnered up with Motec, and together with Robbie from Track Day Performance, we started to calibrate everything, and the most challenging was definitely the high pressure system, which took us quite a lot of time and effort and experience, but in the end the engine was running really nice. And we ended up with 1039 horsepower, 1285 Newton meters. So this is, for me, an insane number. And the engines have been with us for 2 years now. We arrived in Munich right at the heart where the engines of the BMW M are designed and also the prototypes are built. And today we are with Jens, Raphael and Peter.
Hello.
And they already started because they are really eager to also see our S58 that was with us for 2 years. We trashed it. And today is really judgment day. There are so many things we want to look at, and as you can tell, I'm so curious to see them. Starting at the top, quite simple, the valve cover is the first piece that goes up. After that, I guess the engine will be turned around, but we will see what comes next. Under the valve cover there's the entire valve train, and you can see intake and exhaust camshaft. And what was checked now is that the timing of both, so the angle of rotation is correct. And with this tool it is quite simple. If it fits, it checks, and it fits, so thumbs up. Next step is to check the residual moments of the VANUS, the variable valve timing units. So just to double check that everything is sure, but we probably would have seen if the screws weren't really tightened correct, then the timing wouldn't be there. So what you just saw is the head screws that hold down the head, and the next step they will take off the head, and this is very essential because now we first really see into the combustion chamber, to the piston, and the head is off. Just spoke with a specialist, amongst others, for the cylinder head gasket, and he's very happy with the picture. He sees a little bit of a higher wear here on the edges, but nothing to worry about. So the sealing of the combustion pressure happens here. So this is the cylinder bore. Then the sealing from the water and oil jackets is also the other task that the cylinder head gasket has to do. And what they will do is, as you can see, it consists of different layers. They will divide all the layers and inspect them further, and he guesses that they might see a little bit more wear, as I said in the beginning, just on the edges, but nothing to worry about. So yep, I would say thumbs up. This simple tool, it's basically a metal plate just on a bar. What you do with that, you hold it in here and see what happens with the bore. Now it's really bright because it reflects the light, and you can see the cylinder wall way better than without. Like if you look now, it's quite dark and you can't really tell, is there a scratch, is there anything? And once you put it in, it's so bright that you really can see if there's anything wrong. What you probably now see is just a little bit of water debris here, like the darker stuff, but it's nothing that is inside the metal. More analysis has been done, and those are the direct injectors. They bring the fuel from top, which is under high pressure, in this case 350 bar, directly into the combustion chamber. Maybe you can see the small holes here in the middle of the injector. So they spray the fuel directly in the combustion chamber, and they have quite a hard task because they also have to withstand the combustion pressure, and especially those seals here, those Teflon seals, they are in charge for sealing the combustion pressure against the atmosphere, and there are no signs that any heat traveled upwards. So I heard if those start leaking, you really can see it, that there's a difference in color because the heat then really travels up there, and it also doesn't take long. If such a seal leaks, it will be blown in almost seconds. Those look really, really good. This is very good because we basically also maxed them out to bring as much fuel as possible inside the engine, as we want to produce a lot of power. Also a very critical part, the cylinder head. We look from down up here in the combustion chamber. We modified the design of the combustion chamber slightly. This is basically the only mod we've done inside the engine. Other than that, all the parts that are inside the engine are completely stock. This is really a point that is just for me mind-blowing, that we could double the power, double the torque on a stock engine with this very slight modification. But coming back to the analysis, you see some rust around the spark tip. This is just because the engine was stationary for a couple months now, and there was just some humidity, so we can ignore that. But what you can see is some carbon buildup. We are running quite rich. That means we inject a lot of fuel, even more fuel than we have air inside, and this just cools down the temperatures in the combustion chambers, but also leaves some carbon buildup here. But this is nothing to be worried about. It's very slight. If you want to run this engine for, I don't know, 300,000 miles, it might give some issues, but in drifting we don't do that mileage, so it's no problem. Another very critical point is around the spark plug and the injector hole. So this is the hole where normally the direct injectors sit in. So those pieces that we saw before, they sit in those holes and spray the fuel in here. The temperature in this region is mostly the highest, and the task for the cylinder head or for the combustion chamber is to really withstand this thermal and also this pressure load. And the temperature is one value that you can't underestimate. Like 10 or 20 degrees more here can lower the rigidity of the material that far that it actually cracks. So there are many heads out that crack between the spark plug and the exhaust valve, because there is mostly where the highest temperatures occur, but this one looks perfect. It will be cleaned and also analyzed further, but first analysis, thumbs up. The first piston is out, and what I mentioned before, bearing, it almost looks unused. You can see just that it was in use on top here, but there's actually still the coating that is just for the break-in is still visible. They look perfect. Piston from underneath doesn't look like it was heated too much. It's still very shiny. The aluminium, like normally you can see if a piston was too hot inside those pockets here, but it looks perfect. And the next things, the piston rings, just by the looks of it, they look perfect. And also the diamond-like carbon, if I'm not mistaken, DLC coating here for reducing the friction looks also in perfect condition. And yeah, another special in this engine is the connecting rod. If you look at the design here, normal aftermarket or also connecting rods are quite simple, especially in that region. And here the approach was to really transfer the load that comes from the combustion chamber through the piston, through the gungeon pin into the connecting rod, really disturb it well in the bearing surface. Because if you only put it like in the middle here, if you would slim that down, then you have a high pressure region here and lower pressure region outside, so you wouldn't use the whole bearing. And this is the reason why this connecting rod looks like that. And yeah, the result you can see here. You still have the highest pressure on top, but as I said, the slight shiny metal is basically just the coating for the break-in gone. So I would say this is a great success. The main bearings are also out, and most of them even show the number still on the coating. Another main piece of the engine is the crankshaft, and this one is re-engineered. It is actually lighter and stiffer than the one from the B58, the AG engine. And if you look here, you can't see any scratches or anything in the bearing surfaces. But we already had a look at the bearings and they've done their job, so there was never metal to metal contact, and this is the main thing. It should be always oil film in between the bearing and the crankshaft, and this is definitely there. And yeah, amazing piece, forged steel, very complex but very good. Peter and Raphael disassembled the entire cylinder head, so they got out the camshafts and all the pieces that are necessary therefore, the valves and the entire valve train here that are quite many parts because you have 4 valves per cylinder. The valves did their job really well. All the sealing surfaces, the shiny surfaces that you can see here, they are really constant in the circumference, so the valves did their job until the end perfectly. They sealed the combustion pressure against the ambient, and yeah, so again, 2 thumbs up. The abuse that we put it through, it just laughed and took it. Thanks to the experts here, we can now answer the question. We had those babies tuned up to 1000 horsepower. We trashed them 2 years, and is there anything wrong with them? Actually, the answer is no. All the beating that we put on, the engines just took. So this is 2 thumbs up. So the last thing I have to say here is thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Peter.
Gerne.
Danke, Matthias. Danke, Jens.
Gerne.
Coming back with the results from the BMW M GmbH, seeing that the engine hold up easy with all we put on it after the 2 last years, it's amazing for me. However, that's not the only thing that an engine needs to become a new true motorsport legend. Let's look at purchase cost, for example. The S58 is still quite young, prices are still quite high. You need a Motec ECU for the direct injection to control, so the initial cost is definitely higher than on a 2JZ, which runs on port injection and is just cheaper in the first place. However, looking at the running cost, on a 2JZ, if you talk about 4-digit horsepower numbers, you have to have forged internals. That means after 1 season, you definitely want to have a look inside and see if everything is still fine, and probably have to rebuild the one or the other part. On the S58, we could go probably multiple seasons with only changing the oil, and that's it. That's why running cost definitely plus for the S58. Parts availability is a nice thing for the S58 as it's quite a stock engine and you basically can go to any BMW dealer, all of the parts that you need, and you will have them within days. On the 2JZ, some parts you can't even get new from the factory as they are just too old. So definitely plus for the S58. Reliability and durability, I would say that's a draw. However, seeing the results from our two engines, I see that in the future probably the S58 will overtake the 2JZ and is also definitely a quite durable and reliable engine. I would call it a draw at this point. Tunability, okay, for the 2JZ engine that is out for many years, there are definitely more aftermarket parts available than for the S58, which just starts to become a really nice setup for each and everyone out here. So that's why I would say 2JZ takes that one home. Last but not least, complexity. Yes, the 2JZ is a well-known setup. It runs on port injection. It's a quite simple setup. Looking at the S58, it's a direct injected engine. You need to control all that. That makes it more complex in like the electronic points of view. However, once the system is up and running, it runs super smooth. Still, the complexity is a little bit higher on the S58. I would say the S58 is definitely the new 2JZ because you have those parts available. It has the capability of making a lot of horsepower reliable. And also looking at like not only the initial cost, but looking a little bit more ahead, the running cost, I think it will even beat the 2JZ in quite little time from now. And there will be more parts available from the aftermarket and so on and so on. So in my eyes, the S58 is just about to take over. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.